A sleepy summary. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F by Manson. There is a strange and quiet truth tucked away at the very center of a good life, and it has nothing to do with being happy all the time. It has nothing to do with waking up every single morning feeling inspired, or with plastering motivational phrases across your bathroom mirror, or with convincing yourself through sheer repetitive effort that everything is fine and wonderful and going according to plan. The truth, as Manson tells it in his refreshingly honest book, is much simpler than that and also much harder. It goes something like this: life is difficult, and most of the things we fret over do not really deserve the enormous weight of our attention. The art, if you can call it that, is in learning, slowly and imperfectly, to care about fewer things, and to care about the right things, and to do so without apologizing to anyone for the choices you make along the way. Let us begin at the beginning, which is always the best place to start when you are settling in for a long, gentle story. Manson opens by asking us to consider a man named Charles Bukowski, a writer who spent decades being rejected, miserable, unemployed, and deeply unimpressive by almost every conventional measure of success. Bukowski drank too much. He made poor decisions. He failed over and over again. And yet, after years and years of quiet, stubborn persistence, he became one of the most widely read underground poets in American literary history. His tombstone, if you can believe it, reads simply, "Don't try." And Manson wants us to sit with that for a moment, because there is something important inside it. Not that effort is worthless, effort matters enormously, but that the obsessive, anxious, feverish trying that most of us do, the kind driven by fear and insecurity rather than genuine care, tends to produce exactly the wrong results. Bukowski did not become Bukowski by desperately chasing success. He became Bukowski by writing honestly about the things he actually cared about and not caring very much about the rest. This is the foundation of everything that follows in the book, so it is worth sitting with it a little while longer as the night grows soft around you. We live in a culture that is absolutely saturated with positivity. Every billboard, every social media feed, every well-meaning self-help book tells us to want more, do more, be more, feel more, achieve more. And somewhere in all that noise, we have started to believe that negative emotions, sadness, fear, frustration, anxiety, disappointment, are signs of failure. We have been quietly trained to treat discomfort as a problem to be solved rather than a feature of being alive. But Manson's argument, which he makes with a kind of cheerful bluntness that is almost soothing in its directness, is that this entire framework is wrong. The desire to feel good all the time is itself a source of enormous suffering. When you decide that you should always be happy, every moment of unhappiness becomes not just a difficult feeling, but evidence of some deeper personal failing. And that is exhausting. Here is another way to think about it, the way Manson thinks about it. We all have a limited number of things we can genuinely care about at any one time. Caring, real caring, takes energy and attention, and both of those are finite. So every time you choose to care deeply about something, you are by necessity not caring as much about something else. The question then is not how to care about everything or how to feel enthusiastic and positive about every corner of your existence. The question is, what is actually worth caring about? What few things deserve the precious, limited attention you have to give. Because if you spend all your caring energy on what other people think of your haircut, you have less of it left for the things that might actually make your life feel meaningful and whole. Now, Manson makes a distinction early on that is worth holding gently in your mind as you drift. He is not saying, not even a little bit, that you should not care about anything. That would just be a different kind of misery, cold, disconnected, hollow. What he is saying is more nuanced than that. He is saying you should be selective. He is saying that not giving a care about the wrong things frees you up to give a genuine, wholehearted care about the right things. And the people who tend to live the richest, most meaningful lives, he observes, are not the people who have the most things going well. They are the people who have gotten very clear about what actually matters to them and have stopped leaking attention and worry all over everything else. To illustrate this, Manson introduces us to a principle he calls the feedback loop from a bad place, though he uses rather more colorful language than that. Imagine you are feeling anxious. Feeling anxious is normal. Everyone feels anxious. But then you start to feel anxious about the fact that you are feeling anxious. And then you become distressed that you are anxious about being anxious. And before long, you are in a spiral of self-referential suffering that has lost almost all connection to whatever originally made you feel anxious in the first place. Modern life, Manson says, is full of these loops. We worry about not being happy enough. We feel guilty that we feel guilty. We feel bad about feeling bad. And the way out of the loop is not to try to force yourself into a better feeling. The way out is to simply accept that the negative feeling exists, let it be there, and redirect your attention to something that actually matters to you. The feeling does not have to be fixed. It just has to stop being the main event. There is a chapter that follows in which Manson introduces a concept he calls the subtle art itself, and it goes like this. Happiness is not something you find or achieve or are given. Happiness emerges as a byproduct of solving meaningful problems. When you are working on something that genuinely matters to you, when you are engaged with a difficulty that is worth your effort, there is a kind of quiet satisfaction that comes along with that, not euphoria, not constant grinning delight, but something steadier and more sustaining. And the flip side of this is also true. If you have no meaningful problems to work on, if everything in your life has been smoothed into frictionless comfort, you will not feel satisfied. You will feel empty. Human beings are, at a very deep level, problem-solving creatures. We need something to push against. This is why Manson says that the question to ask yourself is not, how do I find happiness? But rather, what kind of pain am I willing to endure? Or put another way, what is the suffering you are prepared to choose? Because every worthwhile thing in life comes with its own particular flavor of difficulty attached. You cannot have a meaningful career without periods of frustration, boredom, and self-doubt. You cannot have a deep relationship without moments of vulnerability and disappointment. You cannot be physically strong without the ongoing discomfort of exercise. The people who have the things they want in life are not the people who found a way to avoid suffering. They are the people who found a form of suffering they were willing to embrace because of what it was connected to, because the thing on the other side of the difficulty was something they genuinely valued. As the story of the book continues, It gets a little deeper, a little softer in the way that a good fire gets softer as the night goes on. Manson turns his attention to the question of values, which is really the central question underneath everything else he has been saying, because the kind of pain you are willing to endure is determined by your values. And your values, whether you have thought about them consciously or not, shape almost everything about how you experience the world. Manson suggests that values can be loosely divided into two categories: good values and bad values. Good values are ones that are based on reality, that are controllable by you, and that contribute to something larger than just your immediate comfort or social standing. Things like honesty, creativity, generosity, being a reliable person, making something meaningful. Bad values are ones that are based on external factors you cannot control or that are inherently self-defeating. Things like always being right. Things like needing everyone to like you. Things like measuring your worth entirely by your level of material success or by how attractive others find you. Bad values create endless suffering not because they are morally wrong, but because they are structurally unsatisfying. You can never actually complete them because they depend on forces outside your control, and the world outside you is not reliable. He gives a lovely illustration here. Someone whose core value is being right in every argument is going to be miserable because no one is right in every argument, and even if you manage to win an argument, there will always be another one waiting. Someone whose core value is honest communication, even when it is uncomfortable, will have occasional difficult conversations, but they will have a fundamental sense of integrity and of being known. The first value is a trap. The second one is sustainable. The question then becomes, where did your values come from, and are they actually good ones? A lot of our values, Manson notes gently, were handed to us before we were old enough to evaluate them. Some of them came from our families, some from our cultures, some from particular experiences that happened to us at formative moments. And many of them are fine, or at least workable. But some of them are quietly making us miserable, and we have not noticed because we have never stepped back far enough to look at them. The process of living a good life, in Manson's telling, involves a gradual reckoning with the values you have inherited and a slow, imperfect, ongoing process of choosing better ones. Not because you are obligated to, not because someone told you to, but because you are beginning to notice that some of your suffering is self-inflicted in a way that does not seem to be pointing you anywhere good. By the middle of the book, Manson has us sitting quietly with a question that seems deceptively simple. You are not as special as you think you are. And before you bristle at that, before the tired, anxious part of your mind reaches for an objection, let the thought land for a moment, because the way he means it is actually quite kind. There is a particular kind of suffering that comes from believing you are exceptional, from believing that you deserve special recognition, or that your problems are uniquely terrible, or that your potential is so vast and glittering that ordinary effort would be beneath you. This kind of thinking, which Manson calls entitlement, creates a painful gap between the life you imagine you deserve and the life you are actually living. And closing that gap requires either getting very lucky or doing a great deal of ordinary, unglamorous work, And most people who are stuck in entitlement would rather wait for the luck than do the work, because the work feels beneath them. What Manson is pointing toward, gently and persistently, is that being ordinary is not a failure. Most people, in most ways, are ordinary. Most of our days are unremarkable. Most of our conversations are not particularly clever. Most of our contributions to the world are modest, and modest is fine. The extraordinary thing about accepting your ordinariness is that it frees you. Once you stop needing to be special, you can actually engage with life as it is. You can work on things not because they will make you famous, but because you find them meaningful. You can have relationships not because they make you look good, but because they make you feel genuinely connected. The pressure lifts, the performance ends, and something quieter and more real takes its place. This connects, in the book's internal logic, to the problem with too much self-esteem as a goal. For decades, there was a cultural movement, particularly strong in Western countries, particularly strong in how children were raised, that said the solution to most of life's problems was more self-esteem. If you just believed in yourself enough, everything would get better. And what happened, Manson argues, is that whole generations of people became very good at believing they were special and worthy of great things, but not particularly better at actually doing great things. Because believing you are wonderful does not require anything of you, doing something wonderful does. And the conflation of those two things has caused enormous confusion and not a small amount of unnecessary misery. Somewhere around the midpoint of the book, Manson introduces what he calls the responsibility principle, and this is where things start to feel less like a critique of modern culture and more like a practical guide for how to live. The idea is this: you may not be responsible for everything that has happened to you, but you are responsible for how you respond to it. And taking responsibility for your own life, really taking it, not just saying the words, but actually living by the principle, is both harder and more liberating than almost anything else you can do. He tells the story here of a man named William James, the great American philosopher and psychologist, who spent years in a kind of low-grade depression, feeling that life was meaningless and that he had no real power to change anything about his circumstances. And then one day, James made a decision, or rather, he decided to believe he had the power to make a decision. He wrote in his diary that he was going to spend the next year treating his will as if it were real, as if his choices actually mattered, as if he had genuine agency in his life. And over the following year, he began to emerge from his depression, began to do his most important work, and went on to become one of the most significant thinkers of the 19th century, not because the world changed, but because he stopped waiting for the world to change and started acting as though his choices had consequences. This does not mean, Manson is careful to clarify, that your suffering is your fault. If something terrible happened to you, you did not deserve it. If you grew up in difficult circumstances, that was not a reflection of your worth as a person. The distinction Manson is drawing is not between fault and no fault. It is between fault and responsibility. Someone else may be at fault for what happened to you, but you are still responsible for what you do next. And clinging to the idea that because it was not your fault you do not need to do anything about it, is one of the quietest, most seductive traps there is. Victimhood, Manson points out with some compassion, can feel very comfortable. It relieves you of the burden of having to act. If your life is not what you want it to be because of what other people did to you, then there is nothing you need to do about it. You just need those other people to change, or the world to acknowledge your suffering, or someone to fix things on your behalf. And the terrible irony is that this posture, while it provides relief from the discomfort of responsibility, also locks you permanently in a state of helplessness. Because the world and other people are not reliably going to change. The only thing you can actually change is how you engage with what you have been given. And deciding to engage, really deciding, is one of the most powerful things a human being can do. The night is growing gentler now, and the book is too. Manson begins to talk about uncertainty, which is a topic that tends to make anxious people more anxious and calm people more calm. And the way he talks about it here is genuinely soothing if you let it be. The central claim of this section is simply that we are almost always more certain about ourselves than we have any right to be. Our memories are unreliable. Our self-assessments are distorted. Our understanding of what we want and why we want it is murkier than we like to admit. And accepting this, really accepting it, rather than fighting it, opens up something rather beautiful. Manson introduces the idea that our beliefs are like layers, nested inside one another. There are beliefs about the world, factual claims about how things work. There are beliefs about ourselves, what we are good at, what we deserve, what we are capable of. And beneath those, deepest of all, are our beliefs about how we measure things, about what counts as evidence of success or failure, worth or worthlessness. Most of our suffering happens at that deepest level, he suggests, in the metrics we use to evaluate our own lives. And those metrics are almost always inherited rather than chosen, and almost always need updating. The invitation here is not to some kind of paralyzing relativism, not to throw up your hands and declare that nothing can be known. The invitation is to hold your beliefs a little more lightly, to be curious about where they came from, to notice when a belief is causing you suffering, and to ask whether the belief might need to change rather than the world. To approach yourself with a little less certainty and a little more genuine curiosity, as though you were an interesting stranger you were just getting to know. And one of the most important things you might discover in this process, Manson says, is that being wrong is not the catastrophe it often feels like. People who are willing to be wrong, who do not need to be right all the time, who can update their beliefs when new information comes in, these people learn faster, adapt better, have healthier relationships, and generally suffer less. The need to be right is one of the most quietly destructive forces in human life, and letting it go slowly, imperfectly over time is one of the most freeing things you can do. We are getting closer to the end now, and Manson has one more big idea to offer before he brings us home. It has to do with failure and with the relationship between action and motivation that most of us have fundamentally backwards. We tend to wait, he observes, until we feel motivated before we take action. We wait to feel inspired before we start the project. We wait to feel confident before we have the difficult conversation. We wait to feel ready before we begin. And the waiting stretches on indefinitely because the motivation never quite arrives in the way we expect it to. But here is the thing Manson has noticed, and that most people who have actually accomplished meaningful things have noticed. Action comes before motivation, not after. You do not wait to feel like doing the work and then do it. You do the work, even a tiny amount, even imperfectly, and the feeling of motivation follows. The brain, it turns out, rewards engagement. It rewards showing up. It rewards doing something rather than waiting to feel like doing it. The first step does not require enthusiasm. The first step just requires starting. This principle, which Manson calls do something, is deceptively simple and almost absurdly effective. When you do not know what to do, do something small. When you feel paralyzed, take one tiny action in any direction. When you are waiting for certainty, move without it. The movement itself generates information, generates momentum, generates, eventually, gradually, imperfectly, a sense of direction and even purpose. You do not have to have it all figured out first. You just have to begin. And failure, Manson argues in a way that is both clear-eyed and oddly comforting, is not the opposite of success. Failure is a constituent element of it. Everything that matters was built on top of a pile of failures, failed attempts, failed hypotheses, failed relationships, failed drafts, failed batches, failed plans. The people who avoid failure by never trying anything uncertain are not safe. They are stagnant. The people who have rich, full, growing lives are the ones who have made peace with the fact that failure is just what learning looks like from the outside. Now we arrive at the last, and perhaps most unexpectedly tender part of the book, and it is here that Manson does something rather brave. He talks about death, not in a gloomy or frightening way, not in a way that should make you pull the covers tighter with dread, but in a way that is actually quite peaceful if you follow it all the way through. He calls this section the final chapter of a life's philosophy, and it is built around a simple observation. Most of us live as though we are going to live forever, and this makes us take the wrong things seriously. Manson draws on the philosophy of the Stoics here, particularly on the practice of what the Romans called memento mori, a phrase that means simply, remember that you will die. This sounds gloomy, but in practice, it is the opposite. When you genuinely reckon with the fact that your time here is finite, when you let that fact actually land rather than keeping it at a comfortable intellectual distance, something shifts. The petty things stop looking so important. The meaningful things stop feeling so optional. The conversations you have been putting off, the work you have been avoiding, the relationships you have been taking for granted, they all start to look different in the light of a life that will eventually end. Manson tells us about a concept he calls immortality projects, the things that human beings do to try to live on beyond their deaths, to make some mark on the world that will outlast their physical existence. Some people do this through their children, pouring themselves into the next generation. Some do it through their creative work, leaving something behind that might be discovered and appreciated long after they are gone. Some do it through the communities they build, the causes they serve, the people they help become better versions of themselves. These projects are not inherently good or bad. What matters is whether they come from a genuine place, from real values, from real care, or whether they are driven by fear, by ego, by the desperate and ultimately futile desire to be significant. The healthiest relationship with mortality, Manson suggests, is not one of denial or of obsession, but of quiet acceptance combined with genuine engagement. You are here, the time is limited. What do you actually want to do with it? Not what should you do, not what would impress people, not what would make you feel safe or significant. What do you actually want? And what is actually worth the short, strange, ordinary, extraordinary gift of a human life? There is one final thread to pull before the book closes, and we let the whole thing settle into rest. Manson weaves together, in his last pages, the idea that a meaningful life is one built on a foundation of chosen values, sustained by the willingness to accept pain and responsibility, and oriented by the honest acknowledgement of what you care about and what you do not. It is not a life of constant happiness. It is not a life free of difficulty or loss or failure. It is a life in which the difficulties and the losses and the failures are connected to something that matters, and in which the small moments, the ordinary Tuesday afternoons, the unremarkable conversations, the quiet work done without applause are enough. The subtle art of not giving a care is at its heart an argument for a kind of quiet courage. The courage to stop pretending you feel things you do not feel. The courage to stop performing enthusiasm for things that do not interest you. The courage to disappoint some people in order to be honest with yourself. The courage to choose a smaller, realer, more particular life over a vast, impressive, hollow one. The courage to care about a few things deeply rather than about everything shallowly. Manson is not the first person to make this argument, and he would be the first to tell you so. Versions of it appear in the Stoics, in Buddhism, in existentialism, in the work of countless writers and philosophers who noticed that the feverish pursuit of comfort and approval tends to produce misery rather than relief. But he makes the argument in a way that is accessible and direct, and laced with a kind of warmth that can surprise you. Underneath all the bluntness, underneath all the pragmatism, there is a genuine care for the reader, a wish that you might suffer a little less, not by avoiding life's difficulties, but by choosing them more wisely. And perhaps that is the best note to end on as your breathing slows and the book folds quietly closed in your memory. You do not have to be extraordinary. You do not have to feel wonderful all the time. You do not have to have it figured out. You just have to choose as honestly and as often as you can what is actually worth caring about, and then show up for it, imperfectly, persistently, ordinarily, day after ordinary day. That, it turns out, is quite enough. That, in fact, is everything. The world keeps turning, the problems keep coming, but so does the morning. And in between, there is a life, your life, modest and imperfect and real, that is asking not for your performance or your perpetual positivity, but simply for your attention and your honest care. Give it that, and you will have given it the most important thing there is. Give it that, and the rest tends to follow. So let the worrying wait until tomorrow. Let the comparisons go quiet. Let the imaginary audience in your head take the night off. You have done enough today just by being here, just by reading this, just by letting the ideas rest in you like seeds in winter soil. They will do their work in their own time, slowly and without fanfare, the way all the best things do. Before we rest, a quiet word. A sleepy summary with its soothing amber light is not meant to replace something. It is meant to point toward a much larger light. It is offered with care and with the genuine hope that something in tonight's listening finds its way into you as an invitation. The whole book is waiting. The real depth lives there, in every word they chose, and every story they told, and every quiet idea they let breathe across a full page. Let this be the beginning of something you carry forward in the light of an ordinary tomorrow, and if this lamp has helped you in some way, a like and subscribe keeps it burning for someone else who might need it too. Sleep now. The art will still be here in the morning, and so will you.